Albany Public Schools Board of Education, resolution number 2020/21-2. Whereas October is time to celebrate our dynamic LGBTQ community, raise awareness of quality services, and foster a dialogue to promote a healthy, safe, and prosperous school climate and communities for all. And whereas Oregon state law addresses discrimination, harassment, intimidation, and bullying towards LGBTQ youth, there have been numerous studies indicating the inequities experienced by the LGBT community, including poverty, homelessness, school harassment, physical assault, domestic violence, hate crimes, mental health issues, and substance abuse concerns. And whereas bullying in schools is a serious matter that impacts student health and safety and aims to develop and engage students, healthy families, safe schools, and strong communities. And whereas LGBTQ youth are almost 5 times more likely to commit suicide. And whereas in 2019, Oregon Health Teen Survey data, approximately 22% of the Greater Albany Public Schools students in 8th grade identified as LGBTQ. And whereas there is a need to focus on localized efforts that support LGBTQ youth, including student and school resources that focus on positive behavioral interventions and support resources on school climate that address bullying and parent engagement, as well as tools for student health and wellness. And whereas thorough interagency collaborations, Greater Albany Public Schools is working to cultivate positive and safe school environments to empower youth with confidence and knowledge to successfully navigate and improve the ever-changing world. Now, therefore, it be resolved that the Greater Albany Public Schools Board of Education proclaim October 2020 as LGBTQ month to inspire equity, create alliances, celebrate diversity, and establish safe environments in our schools and communities throughout the country. Adopted this day, October 12th, 2020. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much for reading that. Were there any additional comments from any of our board directors or district leadership? Yes, Superintendent Goff.
I would like to say that I deeply appreciate this proclamation by the board. I think that it is more than just a statement. It is an example of our commitment to our equity, diversity, and inclusion, making sure that all of our students know that they belong in our schools and are welcome in our schools. And I just want to note in particular that we have had a group of individuals that we have been meeting with here in the school system. And I'm going to get the name wrong, the International, Lisa, maybe you can help me. International Council, the name of our group that we've been meeting with regarding LGBTQ plus issues. International Youth Leadership, is that right? I think so. And what a fantastic group of young people who have come through our schools at one point or another and are really committed to making sure that this is a safe space. So thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay. So moving on to our next agenda item is the fall OSBA conference. So we have our OSBA virtual conference on Saturday, November 14th. It will be an all-day event. And I believe there's a schedule here that you guys can all see on Board Book talking about all the different sessions that will be available to us. So we just need to let, I believe we're still letting Chris know for the registrations for that. And she's doing the registrations for us, even though it's a virtual conference. Yeah, Chris is nodding her head yes. So I just wanted to make sure. So if you guys will all take a look at that, you don't need to know tonight, Chris, correct? We can just do that by email. to you what we would like to attend?
Yes, by the 20th would be great.
Great. So if we can get that by next week on the 20th, back to Chris, that would be wonderful. Are there any questions about the conference? I think everybody's attended at least one now, at least a part of one. So there's going to be quite a bit of COVID related conversations, and I'm sure just with the dynamics of things going on now, what's happening in Oregon for schools across the state. So it will be, I'm sure, an interesting conversation in that regard, and a lot of, I still believe they're going to have quite a bit of connecting with people to be able to have conversations too. So that virtual conference. All right. If there are no questions, just a reminder too to go ahead and use board book if you guys have questions. Oh, you know what? I apologize. It wasn't leading you guys through the agenda. So now it is if you were following along, or if you'd like to follow along now. And then we had at pre-planning talked about the opportunity to have our student board members do some voting along with the regular board members. Unfortunately, our student board member votes don't necessarily count towards our actual vote, but it does provide an opportunity to make sure that we're taking the time to get your guys' input and feedback on each of the topics that we have, and let us know what your perspectives are, and then also have an opportunity to share your vote there. So we will start doing that at this evening's meeting if there are no questions from the other board members, or anybody have any concerns with that. I think it is common practice with some of the other boards around the state and the nation too. So, and Director Eastman, I see your hand.
Will their vote, at what point will their vote be asked for?
My thought was we would do them at the same time as we do all the others, and I probably will start with their votes each time that we do our voting calls requests for. So we'll still get our motions, and then we'll include them at the beginning of that voting process. So any other? Oh yes, Superintendent Goff.
And just for clarity, so they will be able to engage in the conversations with the board and ask questions regarding the matters under consideration.
Yes. Yep. I think we were lacking that a little bit before, and I think that people wanted to, but they didn't always necessarily pipe in. But we want to make sure that we're getting that engagement and hearing from the student perspectives, which is why you all are here. So I think it's important for us to make sure we're getting that and also having it put on record. So I think it's great. All right. And that was it for board business. We're on to superintendent comments. So I will turn it over to Superintendent Goff for your update.
Thank you so much, Chair Butzner and directors. I am excited to be speaking with you tonight. I have a lot to update you on, some of which is in the update, which was, as you will see, dated October 7th. Actually, most of it is not in the update because it's been a busy week. So there are a few things that I want to be sure and point out. First, I just want to share that on this Indigenous Peoples Day, we would like to honor the Kalapuya people on whose land our schools and our homes reside. We wish to honor the history and cultures of our Indigenous tribes across our curriculum and within our schools. And we aim to honor you through our work in equity, diversity, and inclusion, and commit to continuing this work as we live here and operate here on the Kalapuya land. So thank you to the Kalapuya people and recognition of our Indigenous brothers and sisters. I also wanted to note on the OSBA, one of the OSBA sessions, if you're interested, Director Ward will be leading me in a conversation. We actually get to facilitate a session there at the OSBA conference. So we're excited to be able to do that. I wanted to particularly note a few things with you tonight. One is hot off the presses and it's unfortunate news. So we have 108 COVID cases in Lynn County in the last week. Our cases per 100,000 were over 50 3 weeks ago. So 2 weeks ago, over 50, over 40 last week, or 2 weeks ago, I guess. And then last week we were over 80 per 100,000. So the trend that we are seeing, you remember that to get any kids back in school, we have to have under 30 per 100,000. So the trend that we're seeing is alarming, to say the least. It's extremely concerning for me as your superintendent, and someone who wants to, like you, see our kids back in our schools. We do know that the governor has announced that she will be revisiting the metrics. I'm going to stop following the leader. We do know that the governor is going to be taking a look at the metrics, and we anticipate that will may look a couple ways. One is that we know some of our rural districts are looking at greater flexibility with the exceptions that are afforded to them. We anticipate that may be someplace that the governor decides to go. We also note that the threshold right now for K-12 students to return to school is fewer than 10 students per 100,000 with COVID for 3 weeks in a row. That is a really, really high bar or low number to set, and very challenging even for our community, I think, to imagine being able to get there, particularly when we're seeing the numbers we're seeing right now. But even when we were seeing numbers that were consistently 28, 32, 10 seems a long ways away when you're just trying to improve by 2 or 3 cases per 100,000. So we do anticipate that we may see some movement there from the governor, and yet not the type of movement that would likely get us back into schools quickly. With the numbers that we saw today, and I'll be sharing this with staff tomorrow, but with the numbers that we saw today, it's highly unlikely that we would be able to get our kids, any kids, K-3 kids, back in school before Thanksgiving, given that we need 3 weeks in a row below 30 for that to happen. And it's unlikely that we'll get down that low overnight, so we are concerned about Thanksgiving. We know that in the next week to 2 weeks, we should hear the governor's metrics change. That's one piece. And then we'll see if we continue on this trajectory. If next week we continue to see numbers that are as high as what we're seeing right now, I will be bringing to the board a recommendation regarding the potential delay until officially until either December or until January at semester. For our high school students, we know that the semester break is a more natural transition time. And yet we also know that all of our kids want to be connected with each other and with their teachers. And so we are trying to be cautious in making this decision rather than making it too early. So we'll wait for the governor's change in metrics, see if that might change the horizon at all. And we will be in communication with you and with our families as well regarding any decision we make. Right now, all I will say is that it's highly unlikely that we will have kids back in person before Thanksgiving. That gives us a 3-week chunk between Thanksgiving and Christmas. That may be possible, but it's looking less likely with the numbers that we saw today. We've worked on that public service announcement. It's in your packet. it is should be finished this week. You should start seeing that, and my hope is that that will have some impact for all of our communities within Lynn County. Some really great people participated. Really appreciate their support. Chris Reese from the YMCA, thank you. John Anderson from the Boys and Girls Club, thank you. Janet Steele from the Chamber of Commerce, thank you. We had parents and students. Thank you guys for participating. So it really was a community-wide effort going all the way to Sweet Home in Lebanon. And we are looking forward to seeing what that video tells us.
And Melissa, where will that be seen by folks?
It'll be on our district website. We'll push it out over social media. We'll ask all of the schools to push it out over social media. We will send links to all of our families so that they can get in and view it. You can share it from our social media pages as well. And I would ask that you and any of our viewers share it wide, share it far, share it, share it, share it. Students, I know you're good at sharing things. So this would be something really fun to share. Hopefully you'll see it in more than one place, and it won't be someplace that the district is posted. That would mean we're successful in spreading it in the way that we're hoping to spread it. The other thing I want to talk about, courageous conversations training. So last week, I can't believe this was just last week, but Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of last week, all of the administrators in the school district participated in courageous conversations about race training, which is equity and diversity training. We are very pleased with the work that they did and very excited to know that we've got all of our teachers who expressed an interest in participating in the equity work this year. They will be trained in December through the same training. We are establishing our district equity leadership teams and doing a lot of work there. So those were hard. That's a hard training for those of you who have been through it. It definitely makes you think, and it's a lot of introspection, and you learn a lot about yourself and about things you just didn't know growing up, just things you didn't know. I'm going to move on to, I wanted to talk about share with you about the Democrat Herald article that was in the paper on Friday regarding, we had about 100 high school teachers who expressed concern via email to me and Assistant Superintendent Harlan and to Secondary Director Carrie Tatum regarding general concerns with distance learning and capacity, anxiety, planning time, technology, pretty much the whole kit and caboodle of concerns that those are not surprises, right? They're not surprises to me within our system, but they're not surprises for any superintendent within their system. We received that letter on Tuesday. Immediately Tuesday afternoon, met with our building administrators, had a great meeting with the two comprehensive high school administrative teams who were able to kind of catch us up, and we saw some areas where communication breakdowns had occurred that were really telling and helpful to us in trying to figure out next steps. The next day we met with all of the high school staff who wanted to join us, which ended up being about 120 teachers were on the call with us. And just had an open conversation about what are those things that are worrying you, and here are the things, here's what we can answer, and here are things that we can't change because the state has made these decisions, and here are things that we can change. And that was really important because there are decisions that the state makes. For example, with COVID, the decision around the cut mark of 30 is not a decision that we're making at the district level or you as a board are making. That is a state decision. The fact that we need to hit those marks for 3 weeks, that is a state decision. That is not our decision. So we don't have flexibility in certain areas. And similarly, there are some requirements that the state has around teaching and learning that that also restrict us in ways that I think some of the teachers mistakenly thought those were district level decisions. One of those, it's a really interesting decision by the state, is around attendance. So I'm sorry, my cat won't leave me alone, is around attendance. So the way attendance in schools work when you're going in person is if a student's in the classroom, they're present And if they're not in the classroom, they're absent. It's real cut and dried. It's simple. But the way it works in virtual learning is there are multiple ways for kids to participate and be present in a class. They may show up in person during the time that the cast is live or the class is live. They may tune in later and watch the replay of the class because the teacher has recorded it and the student is able to watch it because they're no longer engaged in something else that their parents have asked them to do. They may go in and not watch the recording. They may have missed class, not because they had a doctor's appointment, not watch the recording, just look and see what were the assignments today, and just go in and do the assignments and submit them. And they're considered present in this technical world according to the state. And so that makes it really, really hard for teachers who need to see the faces of their kids and student board members. If I could ask for anything tonight, I would ask that you talk to your friends about the importance of just seeing each other and having the teachers see you as well, because it's lonely. And even for adults, it's lonely. And we didn't get into this job to talk to a blank screen or a black screen if kids have cameras off. And sometimes there are great reasons to have them off, don't get me wrong. But sometimes kids just have them off because they want to have them off, maybe. And I think that interaction is super important. So there were some real ahas that came out of that meeting and changes that we were able to make very quickly, very rapidly by Friday. So we changed Friday's professional development day, received really great positive feedback from staff. We have staff forums going on now by level. Starting tomorrow, we have the elementary staff at 4 o'clock. And then on Wednesday, we have high school at 3:30 and middle school on Thursday at 3:30. And we're going to do those staff forums for 4 weeks in a row. And it will just be the district leadership. So me and Lisa, whoever the director is of whatever level is there, and then the staff and at that level. So we're looking forward to those conversations. I really appreciated the candor. It was unfortunate, the Democrat Herald article, because really we had gotten so far down the road in those conversations that the letter certainly no longer reflected where we were collectively. And I know that the union representatives would say the same thing. So, but it is really good to be able to talk to the positivity that resulted from people speaking their truth, which is so important for us in our community. It's part of what we value. So with that, I think I've covered my notes for this evening to make sure and cover with you. Any questions? Oh, sorry. I knew there was more COVID. Sorry.
Go ahead.
So it's important for us to note that we have now had 6 of our 21 schools have confirmed cases of COVID, either in staff or in students. Both of our high schools today had a confirmed COVID case. And what that means is that all limited in-person instruction and all athletics at the high school level stopped for 2 weeks from either the first sign of symptoms for the person diagnosed or from their date of diagnosis, whichever is earlier, because you can be diagnosed without having had symptoms. So what that means is that South Albany High School has 2 days where they can't have any limited in-person instruction happening at the school, and they can't start athletics for 2 days later than what we had planned for them. What it means for West Albany is they've got 2 weeks because the diagnosis came today. And so they will not have athletics or limited in-person instruction for 2 weeks. And I don't think they were doing any limited in-person at this time. So I think the meeting really attaches to athletics. But it's one of those things to note as we see our students or staff members begin to have positives. If those staff members or students are hanging out with friends that they love but not wearing masks or social distancing, we expect spread to happen. And so it's really, really important that even with those that we love, we pay attention to those guidelines and try to keep each other safe. And that is all, really.
the cleaning, I know this question kind of came up to me, was with the one for South, for example, there's only really 2 days left in that 2-week period, which means, you know, either somebody had it or knew or got diagnosed earlier. So if that's the case and they've gone through this period of time and we didn't remove people from the school, or we've continued to do things, I'm assuming, and even with the athletic things, there's cleaning processes, those types of things that are still occurring, even if we're not doing the learning in person. And so can you just speak to like what that looks like and why there was a difference a little
So,
bit?
and first I'll say that the person who was diagnosed at South had had no contact with anybody through any school activities. So that was not an issue. I'd also say that we're asking that staff and students let us know if they're showing signs or if they are diagnosed, so that we do know that earlier. It is, of course, their own decision. That's a very private matter. So so therein lies the rub. Yeah, the cleaning protocols, Russ could speak to more specifically, but what I can say is that we really spent a lot of March through July planning to the detail how everything would be cleaned, how we would ensure that if a space had been used, that it had been sanitized. And so there are cleaning protocols from including the person occupying the space that they need to do, and then for the custodial crews to come in behind them and make sure that things are safe for others to use. If we had a situation where an athlete were diagnosed or a coach were diagnosed, we would definitely be disinfecting all of the equipment related to that sport, in addition to following the 2-week protocols of delays. So.
And are they doing that same cleaning protocol then with at the facilities where they're having those activities? I'm assuming so. For example, batting cages for baseball, or, you know, the gyms where people are currently, you know, doing indoor stuff. Are those being cleaned by coaches or?
It would be our expectation that that's happening. I will ask that Director Allen verify that for us. Since athletics is just really officially starting back up now, we've got, and because we do have non-school based
Right.
athletic activities happening out in the community that feel that they're school-based because they're kids all from the same school, but they aren't school-based. And so there is a distinction between those as well.
But using the facilities that are the same as our students are using, right? In some
Correct.
cases. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's what I was wondering. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to go first to Director Ward.
Thank you for your report, Superintendent Goff, especially addressing the concerns of our teachers. I think as a board member, I'm not surprised either. I've been really amazed at our teachers' perseverance through these difficult first weeks, and really appreciate the way that their concerns were handled by the administration. And I'm glad to hear that we're getting on the same page again and moving forward. Please correct me if I'm wrong in my understanding, but it's my understanding that we have some staff and students that are participating in athletics and or using our buildings in a limited way, but we also have staff and students that are not involved in athletics or utilizing our buildings, even in a limited way. So if a staff member or student who is not engaged in the building at all or with athletics has a positive COVID test, do we still have to shut down?
Correct. That's correct. It doesn't matter if there has been any interaction with the building or with students or with other staff. It is only where they are employed and where their typical assignment would be. So that it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
There's one bit that I would like to add. With the 108 new cases in this county this last week, we know that there are 6 contact tracers with the county. And we also know that there are other pending tests and cases. So I say that because I don't think all of the contact tracing has there has enough time to be able to do that for all cases, and they're very likely going to, we have a few others where there's a pending test, so there are very likely to be other schools added to that list.
All right, Vice Chair Thompson.
Yeah, I just was wondering about an issue you didn't talk about. We brought it up a couple weeks ago with COVID, with students not in, the student resource officers and our contract with them. What's going on with that? Can you talk about that a little bit right now?
Absolutely. So our student resource officers right now are actually working for APD. We have been very fortunate to be able, I've been able to talk to the police chief and to the city manager regarding our shortfall, our budget shortfall that we are in at the moment, and the fact that we are taking a look at all of our contracted services and trying to see where we are able to save money. One of the places where we're spending a significant amount of money is we carry half of the cost of the SROs in a part of our budget. And yet our SROs aren't needed right now. We don't have students in school. And so we have entered into what I would call a gentleman's agreement around pausing the payments for SROs for our responsibility. And I think it's worked out. It just happens to have worked out for the chief right now, just because I know that she has been a little short in her in staff. So she had a couple slots where she needed people to be in. So it's worked out for the city and it's worked out for us in saving us those dollars. And we really appreciate that partnership. We are, as always with SROs, we're always having conversations about what is the impact of our SROs. And one of the things that we are looking at, which we looked at last fall as well, is the number of referrals that our students have at the high school level. So referrals are is like crime and like arrests, but for kids. So they're called referrals. And so we took a look last fall at where students were referred, how many students were referred, some of the demographics and situations that kids were referred for the police. We want to look at that again for this last school year. We've been having a little difficult time getting that information from the police. We know that the SROs are out on duty right now. So we're still waiting to get that data from the police just to take a look at that. But we think that that would be really good, a really good data point for us to have in conversation among the board, but also with the police chief and whoever she feels is important to engage in that conversation about what those next steps look like. But we really appreciate the partnership that we've been having so far.
And was that it for Vice Chair Thompson? Yes. Okay. Director Eastman.
Hard time finding the mute button with my mouse. I'm glad to hear there are good interactions in regard to the SROs. It's my personal opinion that it's a wonderful opportunity for interaction with students and the police department. And given that we have an exceptionally good and well-run police department, and it's my understanding that the SROs are well-trained as well. And that's it's not just cops in schools, but I think they're ambassadors in schools. I had a couple of quick questions about the cleaning or the COVID in school buildings. It's both. It's deep clean and 2 weeks closure, correct? Yeah. Okay.
Well, it's deep cleaning if they've been in the building. In these two cases, for example, I don't think either one of these cases had an individual who was on campus. So the circumstance that was outlined by Director Ward, where if it's a student who would attend that school, who's going to that school virtually right now, or a staff member who works for that school as a teacher or an education assistant right now, Whether they have been on campus or not does not come into the consideration. It's simply if they're diagnosed. So that is my understanding in both of these last two cases, that neither were on the campus.
So even though they were not on campus, the campus has to close.
Correct. For 2 weeks. Mm-hmm.
I think part of the rationale from the Oregon Health Authority is that we don't have, I don't think many counties have enough manpower to do contact tracing in ways that you would know that you would, because they think students interact with other students, staff interact with other staff. And so to have enough manpower to know if anyone in your circle or bubble overlapped with somebody else who would be coming on campus. But it is correct that even if you were just attending virtually, if you have a positive staff or student case, that campus has to close for 14 days, either at the onset of symptoms or a positive test.
I would like to add that we have a protocol for our daily cleaning. We have protocol for a single cohort exposure, and then we have a separate protocol for multiple cohort exposure. With a single cohort exposure, the cleaning is limited to where that staff or student member might have been. But it is a deep cleaning, electrostatic spraying type of cleaning. And if it's a multiple cohort, then the entire school is shut down or vacated, and the entire school will be receive that treatment.
And if the person wasn't in the school, where do you clean then?
Well, we just do the normal protocol. I have a feeling that was a trick question.
Okay, and Director Ward.
Sorry, me again. So if we have a student at a high school student, say, who has a positive COVID test, but also has siblings at a middle school or at an elementary school, they're living, like, if they're family members, living in the same household, do we have to take additional closures there?
Nope. So the county health and of course our health coordinator, Rachel Smith, are working with families around quarantining and around kind of what that looks like. So their sibling, for example, wouldn't come into limited in person at that school. But let's say you have a sibling at Memorial. Memorial would not have to shut down their in person for 2 weeks.
Unless that sibling also became
Correct.
positive. Got it.
And it's important to note, I didn't think about this until earlier today, but had we all been in school, all of these 5, now 6, and a potential 7th or 8th would have shut down those cohorts at these schools. The cohorts of 100 kids or so.
All right. I don't see any additional questions.
Madam Chair, my hand is up on my thing. I don't know if this thing's working or not.
I don't see it, but
darkened, but yeah,
that's okay. You can always put it up in your screen. I'll watch for that
Thank
too.
you.
Yes.
Okay,
So go ahead.
so I had a question on, so if we close a school because somebody is sick, what do we do with like the SPED students that are still attending that school part-time?
Those students are part of the limited in-person instruction, and they cannot go to school during that time period.
And I know that's a very special interest group. Like, we've communicated to them, like, this is going to happen if there's a case, we're going to close it. And then what is the alternative for those students?
They return to remote learning. We don't have any students who are in-person instruction as their primary learning. So that's supplemental learning. So they just don't get that supplemental learning instruction on top, but their IEP needs are still met, and their distance learning is still met.
And we're not breaking any of their rights or anything like that.
No, because the state says that you have to meet their IEP needs without limited in person, and that you can't do limited in person based solely on a disability. And so these, like, what if this has already been the case. There are at 3 or 4 of our schools, we've already had to shut down limited in person. That was happening at some of our elementary schools. It just so happens this is the first time that it's happened at each comprehensive high school, and it happened to come about on the same day. But this has already been a reality for us.
Okay. I just know there's going to be like a lot of questions. This area gets a lot of questions, and want to make sure we get that covered. And then moving on to this.
Director Arganaga, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to add, we have a special education parent forum that is happening a week from Wednesday. It's so that Director Mattingly can really hear from parents about what some of their concerns are right now during distance learning and how their kids are doing and what could we do more of. So,
okay. Moving on to SROs. So it is my understanding that these officers have quite a bit more training in juvenile de-escalation tactics, or you can call it verbal judo. They have a familiar face with a lot of our students. They have rapport. In your discussions with the police department, did we talk about maybe these would be better officers to dispatch during the day or night when there's calls involving juveniles in our area?
my understanding from talking to the chief is that actually is customarily what they do when those officers are on when an incident happens that involves juveniles.
Okay. So we're not paying the police department right now?
We are not.
Okay. How many people are we paying at Meadowlawn right now?
Do you mean Maple Lawn?
Maple Lawn. Yeah, sorry.
Right. So we're not paying anybody at Maple Lawn right now, are we, Lisa? Are we, Russ? You can check.
Well,
me.
we have not made any payments
Yeah.
yet.
Okay.
We have there. I guess the best thing to say is there's ongoing conversation because they are not providing service to students at this time. However, they do have staff costs. So I would say that there are ongoing discussions, but we have not made any payments.
Okay, I'm asking because these are board contracts, and well, we haven't heard anything and these contracts are changing.
Neither of the
Well,
contracts have
the
changed
contracts
yet.
are not changed.
Yeah, but it's an important conversation
Yeah.
because are we paying on contracts where we're not getting service? And just like the SRO one, it would be difficult to continue to pay on a contract where we're not getting service if we're facing any kind of budget shortfall for our own employees.
An example would be, Russ, what is the SRO? What is the cost that we carry for the SROs?
184,000.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, 180. And we know that this year we're in, just from the enrollment concerns that we have, we're about $500,000 behind. Our revenue is $500,000 less than we anticipated before we look at the additional COVID expenses on the expense side of the sheet.
The SRO was about $159,000 for 2021.
And then if there's an exposure of COVID during athletic training or conditioning, and we have to go in and do deep clean, where are we budgeting for that deep cleaning at with the athletic fund and all of that?
If it was a school-based athletics, it would just be our facilities budget. That's an extension of our extracurricular activities, and so I can't foresee a scenario where we would somehow try and charge athletics for it. That would just be a cost board from the general fund facilities budget.
And if it's an outside program using our facilities?
At this point in time, and perhaps others have additional information, I don't know of outside entities that we've allowed inside our facilities. We've allowed some entities to utilize our fields, but I don't know of an example yet where we've had anyone use anything inside of our facilities. We have issues with regards to insurance on that. We have issues with regards to cleaning after they're done with their activity. And as you stated, we also have concerns as to how we would write it up if there was a case and we needed to do a deep cleaning. But I don't believe we have any situations yet where we have individuals renting our space inside of the facility.
Inside, okay.
Inside. Outside, yes. Fields, we have folks using fields, but not facilities.
So like bleachers and lights and stuff like that. Okay. Thank you. That's all, Madam Chair.
One point that I'd like to make, or just a bit of information, because I think Director Aganaga asks some great questions that the board should be asking. in regards to our intergovernmental agreement with Maple Lawn, if you'll remember, maybe last month, we were awarded as a district a early learning hub grant. That grant makes it possible for us to expand our preschool opportunities from Waverly to including Waverly and Sunrise, and also offer us opportunities where we can support preschool in a different way. I think the total grant, I would have to look, was 300 and something thousand. And so that was great for the district. But I mentioned that because that is a way to be able to support things like Maple Lawn, Waverly, Sunrise preschools. Also, board, because you'll see, and you probably already have on Facebook or other things about preschool opportunities. And I can see the public saying, well, how, why are there preschool opportunities if we can't bring kids into school? And that is through a different grant fund and a different mechanism and a different set of guidelines in terms of being able to have 4 students. Limited in person allows you to have under 10 students. And of course that would be under 10. But I think that's important to note because juxtapositioned without all of the information, it may not make sense.
So business as usual, if COVID ends and at the end of December, we are planning to bring our SROs and our preschool staff back to the district.
We are not at, right. So at this point, we're not making any decision regarding contracted work. Right now, we're asking all of our contracted partners who we're not using at the moment to just pause. And then we will look at where we are at the point that we're able to re-engage.
Thank you. Director Eastman, do you have an additional?
Well, I don't want to belabor this any longer, although if the any of the contracted services become issue of budgetary difficulties, I would respectfully request that the high school principals be involved in the issue with the SROs, just to get a well-rounded discussion at the board level. If it becomes an issue that we have to take any kind of voting action on, I'd just kind of like to hear one more layer to the process. Thanks.
And certainly we would also have the voice of our students involved in that as well. We would want to hear the experiences of our students with SROs to really guide us in those next steps. Similarly with Maple Lawn, we'd want to hear the information from our parents in the direction that we go with Maple Lawn.
And I, just for the sake of acknowledging for our minutes and just kind of where we're at, because this one came up as a topic not necessarily on our agenda, but we are not engaging in any conversations as far as it is related to the SROs or even Maple Lawn right now. Those are 2 things that are status quo. I think we even had at our last meeting, we mentioned the fact that we were working with those contracted partners because of the fact that they're not actually providing any services right now. And so that was where we're at, is kind of an agreement base between, especially with the police and the school district, that while their services aren't being utilized by us, the police department is still utilizing their services, probably for the minors and the folks in our juvenile system, and still assisting the police department in that manner, but then also can be used another way for them in the interim if needed. Obviously those things don't go away completely just because the kids aren't in school. So, but that is for them to kind of manage and figure out how they want to work that for the time being while they're not in our buildings. So I just wanted to make sure everybody was kind of wrapped around where we ended up with that, that topic for sure. So thank you. I don't see any additional hands as soon as I clear Pat's from the last one. And I just want to clarify, Superintendent Goff, that you completed the reopening plans. Did you still have any additional comments on the reopening plans before we move to board reports?
No, I think we
covered everything.
Yeah, complete. Okay. That's all the information I have right now. So
okay. So one last time, any questions from any of our directors, student directors, anyone for reopening plans? Seeing none. All right, we will move on to our board liaison reports, and I'm just going to look for show of hands if anyone has any specific reports to provide at this time. Not see, oh, Director Ward.
Well, it's not really a report. I'll just, Superintendent Goff brought up the courageous conversations, and I think I, like the rest of you, probably had our one-on-ones with Elaine in the past week. Found that really helpful. Great follow-up to the discussion that we had as a board. And at the end, I told her I felt like she was my my very own like equity counselor, and maybe that's what we all need these days, just our own counselor. So I found that helpful and appreciated her taking the time and the district providing us with that opportunity.
I was starting to talk and didn't have mine off mute. So was everybody able, because I just realized I was not, was everybody able to go in and pick up their copy of the book that is at the district office? Some yeses, some nos. Okay, so a couple of you did, the rest of us don't forget, because I forgot. So make sure we head over there and pick those up. And I believe anytime during the day right now is fine. They're open until 3 still. Yes, Chris?
9 to 1.
9 to 1. Thank you for
Monday
that.
through Friday.
Perfect. So anytime 9 to 1. Thank you.
Actually, we just expanded that to 2 o'clock. So they take a break from 11:30 to 12:30, but they are open until 2. So technically 9 to 11:30 and 12:30 to 2.
Thank you for that. I would have shown up at 11:45. So I appreciate that. Yeah.
There is a doorbell. People are there pretty much from 7 a.m. on.
Any other board member reports? No. And how about our student board member reports? LJ, can we start with you?
Yes, can you hear me? Good.
Can, thank you.
Perfect. So yeah, I just wanted to quickly, I didn't do this last meeting. I wanted to give a quick, huge shout out to the performing arts teachers at West Albany High School, Mr. Welsh and Mrs. Caffrella. They're doing a fantastic job with what they have, with maybe what might be the hardest classes to teach online. But I'm in the band program. I don't know so much about the choir, but everything is going smoothly. It's going probably as good as it can possibly go. So those are good things. And I've been in touch with a lot of students in the past week from our school. They love the new schedule. So that's great. They're loving the extended lunch, and the 30 minutes asynchronous is really helping. A couple of the things to look at was a lot of students are complaining about the amount of work that they are getting. Like a student may have up to 4 classes a day, and they'll be given an assignment to finish in class and then an assignment to finish as homework. So students are getting up to 8 assignments that are due the next day. And a lot of it is just overwhelming. Maybe that's something to like look at, is the like amount of work that students are being given and like extending due dates. Maybe I know a lot of students have been having disappointing moments with being punished for late work or not being able to finish things on time simply just because they're overwhelmed and their schedules are full, and they're dealing with stuff at home and work and athletics when they come. So maybe that's just something to look at. It's like students have their time away from school. So even though like the schedule during school has given them more time, like the homework and stuff out of school, maybe limiting that a little bit. And another thing that has come up a lot is the Wednesday advisory. A lot of students have been deeming it as like unnecessary because a lot of teachers aren't really doing anything during that half an hour productive. So a couple things we thought of were maybe like a a check-in quiz. I know a couple of teachers are doing that. So like a check-in quiz, or maybe like grade checks or things for like the teachers to have that they can connect with the students on those advisory periods. So I just had, yeah, that was pretty much all we had. So maybe those are some things to look at.
Thank you for the update. I think it's really important we continue to hear from you guys, and I appreciate the fact that you said that you've reached out and talked to quite a few students, because that's also really important in your role here, in just sharing with us as much as you can. I know from my perspective, I've heard a little bit of the same from the students I've been around, where they feel like there's a lot, and I think they understand the reason that there's a lot is just they're trying to get all of the learning in that period of time that we're dealing with for the semesters or quarters. And I know that's part of it. I have heard a lot of the teachers that I've experienced making comments about the fact that, hey, they're being pretty flexible. You can turn it in, later, you can go back through the courses. And so I think it's important that those students, if you can relay back to them, just to make sure they're sharing that and talking maybe with the school, even counselors and administrators, because I think we want that to be as consistent of a message as possible. And I'm sure that's some of the stuff that Lisa and Melissa have been talking with administrators about, is just how flexible people can be in this environment. So please make sure they continue to share those concerns, because I think those are important for us to hear for sure. So thank you for the update. And Esperanza, we'll have you go next.
I would like to start off by saying is I feel like me and LJ had a lot of the same feedback. The nice part of being the representative in this situation is the students, as soon as they realize that it's me, they're reaching out to me, wanting to talk to me, maybe having me talk to something and then relaying to you guys, or what I learned here, I relate to them. And it's just a good hearsay, they say type of situation, because sometimes they don't have 2 hours to sit through these meetings. And so just to go off what he said about the assignments, for all of my teachers, I don't feel like any of them have pushed the due date in our faces. They've all kind of stated that as long as you have it in by a certain point that they can grade it, they don't really care. They just want to make sure that you're engaging and following along with the class and not just sleeping while on video call and taking a good nap for a good second there. And another thing that I feel like that I disagree with LJ on is the Wednesday advisory. For me and a lot of my other students, as weird as it sounds, it's the only way we're gonna get up at 9 a.m. to do our work, and we're gonna get up and get ready for the day and actually start our day and have it be productive. And checking in with me personally, my Avid teacher is just a good second to just talk and have that moment. And sometimes I'll stay after class, and a lot of students actually stay after the 30-minute period to talk to our teachers. And then after the 30-minute period, I have a speech and debate practice, just because we don't have it this semester and it's a competition season. Everything's online, but we still have the competition season to ready ourselves for. So I feel like Wednesday is a huge part, and that advisory is a huge part of my schedule right now. And I haven't heard anything bad about having it. A lot of the students just feel as though, at least the freshmen feel as though they just aren't connected with their teachers, so they don't see the reason of going, while everyone else, especially the Avid students, love having it. Another thing I'm questioning on, so I don't know if anyone can answer this for me, is there's a rumor, I haven't had a stated teacher say it, is having cameras on is now a requirement. You can't have it off, and if you do have it off, they have to report it to the school, and it goes to your families. I don't know if that's a thing right now. I had one teacher stick on that, while the rest of them didn't really care today. So I don't know.
I think there was some confusion on that. So we had a conversation with the high school staff on Wednesday last week, where they really shared the difficulty that they're having with the number of blank screens in class, that has been really challenging for them to know if students are engaging in the material, and just the fact of facilitating in front of just a couple kids is kind of not their gig, right? Part of how they get their souls fed is through the interactions they get to have with you all. So we did talk about, we were really surprised, Assistant Superintendent Harlan and I were really surprised at the percentages that teachers were sharing of students who are turning off their screens, because we really shared the expectation that students have their cameras on unless there are extenuating circumstances or situations where they have been given permission to not have them on. So, and that can range, right? That can mean like there's stuff going on in your home, there's a little bit of chaos, you've got little kids running around. So your parents say, listen, I really like the camera to be off for her so that I can walk around and not worry about how I look behind her in the camera, right? There also can be circumstances where students have such high levels of anxiety that they are feeling really self-conscious when they're in the camera. But then for a lot of students, it's just a choice that they choose to make for because it's a little easier and they might have a little less accountability, and that's kind of a fun thing. So we did talk on Wednesday with the staff around, okay, well, maybe what we need to do is have that set up as more formally, so that students need to have some sort of sign out from a parent, right? Some sort of form signed saying, yeah, they can't have their camera on, or they get to grant not having their camera on. It's interesting because LJ talks about the performing arts teachers, and one of the things they talked about was, no, we actually tell kids not to have their cameras on because we're having so much difficulty with the feed and the lag on Zoom that we're asking kids to turn their cameras off. So then by the end of the meeting, we were kind of like, oh, this seems like two problems that are happening at one time, and maybe one solution isn't going to work. So we went back and talked to all of the administrators, elementary, middle, and high. And what we decided to do was put together an advisory team. Actually, two advisory teams are starting this week. One is around cameras and whether and what our district policy should be about cameras being on for students. And there were diverse opinions among our teachers, right? About, well, it's okay if they don't have their cameras on, if they just turn them on to show me their work when I've asked them to do a free write, if they just can hold it up to the camera so I know they have some engagement, and then they can turn their camera back off, for example. So there's mixed opinions. So we're starting that. And that is representative of all the schools. There will be a teacher from every school there. There will be administrators as well around the camera issue. That starts this week. And so you'll see a policy come out, and both of you, this will be the key to success. If both of you come to that board meeting after that, if there are changes, formalization happens, you'll come to the board meeting and you will have the exact same story to tell. And it will be exactly the same expectations in both of your schools, in all of your classes. That will be the true test of whether we do a good job. The second team that is meeting, and I should have mentioned this earlier, is a scheduling team. So we have found that teachers from all different levels and staff and students as well, and parents are giving us feedback about the schedule and what's working for them and not working for them at different levels. I think I appreciated that you both kind of felt better about the schedule change, that's helpful. And there's also this dynamic of, because at the high schools, we're doing a semester's worth of work in a quarter, you're seeing this 8 assignment every night phenomena that LJ talked about that can be really overwhelming. And it's overwhelming for the teachers too. Can you imagine how many papers they're having to grade when they're having to assign all that work? That's just, woo. So we're going to have a scheduling committee, and I don't do this, but I texted Assistant Superintendent Harlan while you two were talking and said, we need students on the scheduling committee. So we've got representatives from all of the levels, all of the schools that will be on that scheduling committee. That will be kind of a longer meeting, and what we'll be looking at is any changes in any schedule won't be happening, any more changes, you've already experienced one, won't be happening until the quarter. So I think that's November 9th. So that team will be spending some time and coming back and recommending, and we'll discuss things and figure out a solution. So So if you're interested in that, or you have people who immediately after this board meeting call you and say, I want to be part of that scheduling team, let us know. Just shoot us an email. Okay. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, I think that was all that I really had to say, other than what I said last time. Was there anything that could be talked about, what resources there are for students for their mental health right now? Because along with all these assignments, that like I can see how all my friends are getting affected and not wanting to, like, they can't leave their house, let alone not wanting to leave their house because they don't have the time or the effort. And that's along with the cameras. I don't know if it seems like a big issue with you guys is no one wants to look decent right now. No one has, like, I've had a lot of my friends who, like, they don't look good, they don't feel good, and let alone turning on the cameras for a bunch of other students to see. It's not going to be a good, like, scenario for them. And yeah, that's all I really had to say. And I will probably have to leave early tonight just because I can tell this is gonna go pretty late. But yeah, thank you for hearing me out and letting my voice be said.
And thank you for sharing too. I appreciate that. It sounded like we had a couple of hands raised. So Director Ward, did you have a follow-up?
Thank you. Thank you to Esperanza and LJ for your very insightful reports. Superintendent Goff, I think in some email that you sent us, you did tell us about those committees that are being set up. And I think you also mentioned that a survey will be going out. And I wondered if the scheduling group would have access to the results of those surveys before any changes to, or not changes to, schedules get decided on.
They should before it's finalized. So we are working with TNTP, which is the New Teacher Project, who's been working with us throughout the summer to plan for how to accelerate learning rather than remediate, right? So they've been doing a great job with us. And the surveys will be for students. They'll get surveyed, staff, parents, staff from different roles as well, all different roles. So we'll be having a pretty good cut at how folks are doing and how they're feeling about the schedule. Yes. So that will go to the scheduling team for sure. It'll come to the board. More importantly, the results will go back to whoever took the test, or the survey. So students will see the results of their surveys pretty quickly. As soon as all the surveys have been taken, we'll turn those back around. So students get to see, what are my peers feeling? What are they saying?
And Director Aganaga.
So I would strongly urge to have a doctor, mental health professional be on your Zoom committee about the cameras. So there is such thing as Zoom fatigue, and having your camera on all day is a big stressor. And so I think it'd be very wise. I would recommend that.
Yeah, you cut out for a minute. So you said there is such thing as
Zoom fatigue. And it can be a stress. I mean, I teach classes and I turn my camera off when I teach to do projections, but I think it would be wise.
Okay. Some very, very good feedback coming from our student board directors. So thank you for that. It's very helpful for us to hear those things as we're going. And don't feel like you have to wait. That would be my other recommendation. If things come up week to week, day by day, and there's things you want to share, please just send those in an email to, I'm sure Superintendent Goff or Assistant Superintendent Harlan, either one of them or both, and they'll make sure that gets addressed and looked into. So as you get those questions, I think it's helpful to share those. Don't wait for these meetings by any means. So 2 weeks, we know anymore, can go real fast or real long, depending on what we have going on, but lots of changes obviously occurring in a 2-week period of time for sure. So, okay. All right. Moving on in our agenda, we have comments from the public, which we did not receive any comments to go through today. So we will pass that on by, and that puts us into our consent agenda. You all see here, we have our personnel, our meeting minutes from our last board meeting, and also minutes from our work session on September 21st. And then another set of board meeting minutes from the 28th. So rather than going through each one, do any board members have anything to address on any of those minutes or information? I'm seeing heads no shaking. I just wanted to mention, I don't know, did Director Thompson, did Vice Chair Thompson leave us? I think he said 8 o'clock, correct? Okay, I just wanted to make note that he's not here, so we may not hear from him, but he may pop back on as soon as he's able to join again. Okay, so all of our consent agenda items will pass with unanimous consent. We had no old business. And that brings us to our reports and the student and staff demographics, which I think is Superintendent Goff. Are you doing that one?
It is, and I did not get a glass of water for myself tonight, and I so wish I had. So
would you like to take a quick, but the other thing is we have not had long enough meetings recently to take a break, but we could take a quick break since we probably all will need one. Let's take, okay, so let's take 10, 5, 10, 10. Let's do 10 minutes.
10? Wow.
Let's do 10. I had both. Let's take 10 minutes. People can get water, refreshments, what they need. Oh, and I see Esperanza's hand up. Are you needing to leave? Yes, that's perfectly fine. You can always check the recording for the remainder of the meeting, or if you have any questions, reach out to any of us. But thank you for being here while you could, for sure.
So we will. Esperanza. Oh, she's gone. Shoot.
Oh.
I'll catch her. Oh, no, you're there. You're just popping around. People are turning on and off.
Yeah.
Cameras. They're popping around my screen. Esperanza, we will email you and LJ the student mental health resources so that you know what those are and can share them out. Okay. And we will reshare them again because it's clear we need to continue to do that.
Yeah. All right. So we will be back at 8:25. Thank you. I think we have everyone back that was on. Director Larry is the only one. Was he? I think he was on when we.
There he is.
There he is. All right. So Superintendent Goff, I think we were at student and staff demographics.
Thank you, Chair Butzner. So I'm going to talk here about the last 2 years of data. So last year and this year, I guess. So 2 years of data, and show you just a little bit of information about who our kids are in the schools and or virtually in the schools right now, and who our staff are. So here is the race and ethnicity breakdown of our overall staff and our overall students. I've got to try to figure out where I'm going to, there you go, how that works. So the way these graphs work is if you're looking at the students' race and ethnicity, which is on the left-hand side of the screen, and you look at Black students, they're at the very top under the title, you'll see 3% listed for this year and 0% listed for last year. So one of the things that we can note from this data is this questioning around where we know we had Black students within our system last year. And actually we know that that 3% is probably more like 5% of our students. And so where are students who self-identify as Black showing up in the race and ethnicity report? Well, one of the places that they may show up is under multiracial. So they may self-identify as having parents of different races. And so you'll see the multiracial group over there at 6%. In the parentheses is last year's percentage. So you can see this year's percentage outside of the paren and last year's percentage inside. The change that we saw is interesting in that we see about 5% more students of color, students who self-identify as students of color or an ethnicity other than Caucasian. And we see, of course, 5% fewer white students than last year. And we don't know if it's because we are talking more about race and ethnicity. Maybe students are looking at that data, parents are identifying things differently. We see the drop in Hispanic students, and we wonder whether that's a loss of students, of our Latino and Hispanic students who are not engaging in distance learning. And one of the places that we are taking a next step to look at, which is what good data does for you. It just tells you what the next questions are that you need to ask. Part of the reason we look at these reports is to look at our students' demographics as compared to our staff demographics. So on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see our overall staff demographics. And you can see whereas we have 15% this year of students who self-identify as Hispanic, we only have 8% of our staff who self-identify as Hispanic. So about half as many staff, half the percentage of staff as we do of students. And you can kind of see that across the board where representation among our staff is very low as compared to the diversity of our student body. When we look at staff a little bit more deeply and break it down into classified staff, so those are the staff who are custodial, nutrition services, education assistants, transportation, secretarial support staff, other staff in those maintenance, in those roles, you see that we have more diversity in staff who are doing those jobs than we do in our staff who need a license in order to do their jobs. So licensed staff includes teachers and administrators. And so you'll see that whereas we have about 16% of our classified staff who self-identify other than white, we have only 9% of our teachers and administrators. This is one of, this graphic was one that we discussed here at the board level last year in depth about our concern that students couldn't see themselves in those who are teaching them. We also heard parent testimony regarding that last year, and we saw feedback about that during our strategic planning work last year as well. And this really captures that we have not made a significant change in that. We actually, it shows that we're just almost exactly at the same percentage for licensed staff. A major reason why the program that we have begun this year to support future staff of color, graduates from Albany, in their successful journey to become teachers and in other positions such as counselors and school nurses is so important. Then we ask about gender, and one of the things that we find is that our female to male ratio for students is a little bit higher. We have about 52% female, and that flip-flopped from last year. So really just hovering around 50-50. No students who self-identified as non-binary on our registration forms. Now, here's what's interesting about that. For students to, for a gender to be entered, or changed, it needs to be a contact with the office at the school, because the school staff actually has to work within the system. It's not something that you just have the option for when you're doing your fall registration for your students. So when you go in summer to register for fall, this isn't one of those choices that you as a parent have the opportunity to change yourself. So we have some questions about, can that be something that families can change themselves? Because gender is often something that students may not be comfortable talking about or having their parent talk about with a school staff member that may feel more comfortable identifying within the registration. So that's something of note that we need to be paying attention to and taking some action on. Staff gender, you'll see that is overwhelmingly female. This is typical. About 80%, a little over 80% of our staff are female. Now we look at the staff broken down by classified and licensed, and you can see that we have where we have about 76% of our classified staff female. We have a lesser percentage, 72% of our licensed staff are female. Still a big difference between the 50-50 of our students. And that is it for the demographics of students and staff. So I welcome any questions that you have. Kind of, if you'd like to see, this report is one that next year we'll have trend data. So we'll have 3 years of data. You'll see it differently than in these pie charts, and should show us some trend lines as far as the directions that we're going and any changes.
Thank you. Director Eastman had a question or comment.
Superintendent, could you give us just a little bit more background on the teacher pipeline? I think part of that speaks to the disparity that is evident there. Is there, well, just.
Yeah, so.
I had the opportunity to hear you today that others didn't, and I think that might be interesting to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. So the teacher pipeline is a program that we started near the end of last year. It was in direct response to this data and the strategic planning feedback that we had, where we really need, students really need to see themselves in those who are teaching them and those who are encouraging them from the offices of administration. So we set out to find graduates or people currently within our school who are racially diverse or linguistically diverse, and to encourage them to pursue a career in teaching and nursing and school counseling, school mental health services, social work services. And what we found were we had many people already on that pathway, but who had not been receiving support on their journey. And so that journey was going to take them a long time to complete their program. So what we did was we used some of our student investment account dollars in order to provide scholarships for folks who were recent grads who are either going to LBCC or some are going to local colleges, or who are current employees who are in the classified staff who want to go over and join the certified ranks, and provided them scholarships. And those scholarships get larger as the as the candidate gets closer to graduating from college, and then that candidate gets to come back and work in Greater Albany Public Schools, at least interview with us. And we have kind of what's called first rights of refusal. So we get the opportunity to say, oh, okay, well, it's just not going to work, or we get the opportunity to bring them in. And our goal with that really is twofold, not only for our students currently, but it's for the future of the GAPS community, and that we really want our students to know that this is a safe and welcoming community for them to raise their families. And we want them to come back here and stay here and raise their families here. And this provides that opportunity as well.
Yeah.
And Director Ward.
A comment really regarding the trend data. I always appreciate it when data can be presented over time. I think this is the first time we've seen race and ethnicity data compared from year to year, and I really appreciate that. And look, I'm glad you said that we'll have 3 years next year. I'm glad that that's going to continue. I think that'll help us identify trends in race and ethnicity among our student population, but then also we would hope to see trends in our staff as we try to more closely approximate what our students look like.
I just had one quick question. I was curious where, and I know demographics are different around the state, but are these pretty consistent to what we experience in education in general, as far as the percentage of female to male teachers and that sort of thing? Or
well, the gender breakdown, certainly, right? So the race and ethnicity really does vary, depending on where you live,
right.
Can vary really dramatically even in this within our state. But the gender breakdown is very typical. One of the things that is interesting, and actually we will be sharing at that OSBA presentation, is that the gender breakdown for staff of this 75% women, 25% male is pretty much how it breaks down in the teaching cadre. It flips for superintendents. So there's 75% male and 25% women. And so one of the questions for us as a system trying to grow a healthy system, right, is creating all of those avenues for folks for their own professional growth. And what are those considerations? So this doesn't go into that detail here at all, but these are very typical staff breakdowns. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any additional questions. Oh, Director Aganaga.
Sorry, the little hand and me are not having a good night. That's like a error message. It's a very difficult climate with like police departments, fire departments, city governments are all trying to recruit diverse staff right now. And you talked about your efforts that you made with like scholarships at the end of the year last year. What other attempts are we looking at this year or post last year to increase our diversity of staff?
Yeah, great question. So last year, actually, we had we expanded our recruiting our areas from which we were recruiting, and understanding that it is very hard for people to move out of state into a community to diversify a community. That tends not to be a very successful approach. However, recruiting kids right out of college for their first job is a place where you can make some headway. And so Director Larry and Rich Sipe, who works with him in HR, both had signed up to go to recruiting fairs in really exciting places, in LA and in Northern California, and places where we knew we were going to have a lot of graduates who may be interested in coming here and see the interest that we have in welcoming them here to the community. Unfortunately, all of those job fairs were canceled because of COVID. So none of that recruiting happened. We are also, though, doing some things that look a little different. We have changed all of our posting to bilingual Spanish preferred, so that potential applicants understand that we want you to come here, to feel welcome and know that you are wanted. We have tried to expand into professional organizations and into atypical places for postings. And we haven't had as much success with that yet. So it's really trying to find the right niche. We do know that for licensed staff, we have professional organizations within the state of Oregon through which we can advertise. And we did that specifically for our high school posting, for example, trying to really broaden the candidate pool.
Thank you. Those are the efforts that I was kind of looking for. And I know it's difficult because everybody's trying to do it. It has been really doing it for a while.
Mm-hmm.
What opportunities would we have for the staff that want to progress in their career that don't meet our criteria of being a diverse person?
Mm-hmm. Well, we have the typical opportunities that they have. So we already have by contract written in that every staff member has a certain number of credits that they get paid for by the district over a certain period of time. I think it's 3 years, maybe 9 credits. I'm not sure. Randy's probably going, no, that's not it. But something like to that effect. So it's already built into contracts. This is really to look at where do we see historically underserved populations within our current staffing who need an additional support in order to take those steps.
No, and I appreciate that. Yeah, that's definitely one of my board goals, is diversifying our staff. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
All right. So that takes us into Division 22. And I believe this one was Assistant Superintendent Harlan.
It is, Madam Chair, members of the board. Each year, school districts are required to report to their school boards the district standing with respect to the Division 22 standards for public elementary and secondary schools as set out by OARs and also by the Department of Education. So there are 2 things to note. One is that the Division 22 assurances, that report that's given, is based on the previous year. So that's the district saying, here are the standards and our assurance that we met those standards for the previous school year. So 2 things have happened. One, this report typically, for those of you who have been on the board for a little while, typically comes to you actually at a different time of year. It typically comes around February, January or February. And the Department of Education previously, kind of before the world had fallen apart, had moved that to October, November. So the timing is a little different, and that was planned on before, but it just so happens that at the same time, schools across the state actually closed last year. So one of the things that you'll see in these assurances is the number of standards are vastly different than they are. So than they typically are in a typical year. So the standards that you see, any that are not included in that report were waived for the 2019-2020 school year because of the COVID closures. And in your board packet, you'll see, of course, the formal report that's required, but you'll also see the OARs that kind of define what each standard is and what it means, just for your reference. And largely it is around distance learning for all diploma credit, some procedural things around keeping educational records and complaint procedures, things like that. And so this is our annual report for Division 22. Looks a little different than it does or has in years past. You'll see that we're in compliance for all of the Division 22 standards that were not waived last year. And again, any that you don't see on the list, I think there are only 17 or 18 were waived for the 2019-2020 school year.
All right. Were there any questions about this report this year?
So number 9 right there were the counselors for elementary. You know, I know we had planned to put a counselor in every elementary school. And unfortunately, all the money just went away when COVID happened. But it's a serious issue. And I don't have faith in the system to build the Student Success Act with fires and pandemics and other things. And especially when kids are under so much stress. I mean, when do we start talking about a bond for 20 counseling positions? When do we get really serious about that? I mean, sheriff's departments, police departments put out levies, and I just don't really want to wait around for the state to give us the money.
I take it that's a question for fellow board members or the superintendent.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I guess.
Well, I do think that is one of those things we would have to probably engage in some additional research about what is appropriate for us to look into doing, and maybe put that on a future agenda as a future agenda item, because I do think it's something that would be quite extensive for us to talk about. In looking at this report today, I know that we're in compliance with what the requirements were. And I don't know if there's anyone that can speak to whether they think those requirements are going to be changing at all, if that's been discussed. Because I can't imagine that this is not an uncommon concern around the state or even nation at this point, right? I know that there's been a lot of talk about this particular piece, and I think it's worth us, trying to engage in gathering some additional information about what is coming from the state, if anything, or what is coming from the federal government. And if that isn't coming and it's something that we want to consider looking into as a board, I think we just need to do some inquiring and research to see what steps are appropriate even for us to take at that point, right? So
and I could be completely wrong about the compliance, but I believe that we're only in compliance as there were some changes at the last minute with COVID. I mean, wasn't there a requirement for a counselor for every 250 students in our elementary schools?
No, that's the quality education model I think that you're referring to. So last year, we did not believe for the year previously that we were in compliance for counseling for elementary. One of the things that we did is I worked with the Department of Education for clarification, because I have worked in many districts in the state, and I know they don't all have counselors at the elementary level. So my question was, am I interpreting this a little bit differently? We also simultaneously worked with partners, mental health partners, specifically Lynn County Mental Health, who was able to say we can assign kind of a primary counselor for each elementary school, so that if something came up, we would have kind of a pipeline for service for families and for students, so that you wouldn't have the instance where you would have an elementary student who you would need to refer for mental health counseling or service, and that it would go to a different person each time, or that there would be such a wait time that that person wouldn't get service. So through just some conversation with the Department of Education around that requirement and how others were meeting it, and then our own internal staff and partnering, we're able to say we're in compliance, but that does not mean that we have an elementary school counselor at every school.
How many elementary school? There's 14 or 15 elementary schools. How many? 14. 14. How many elementary school counselors are assigned to that duty?
Oh, we have 2 elementary counselors in the district.
And is that paid by
general fund?
General fund.
So I see on the agenda that later on that we do get the report on the SIA funds, such as they are. And so I think that will be, I'm really interested in hearing about that. Obviously, they're not as much as we had hoped, but I think part of the conversation around that is what will that get used for?
Okay. Thank you.
And I did take note also that we'll continue to look into some, other options if there are things that we can address as a board, or that the district can look into for how we would take any additional steps to try to build that part of our program.
Yeah, let's schedule a call between the two of us for this week. Because we all see on Facebook every day that my 11-year-old is breaking down crying on their Zoom. And it's happening every single day. And unfortunately, contracting with Lynn County Health or private organizations, a lot of that is emergency service counseling. It's not like, hey, let's go ahead and talk. Let's set this up and we're going to be friends. You're going to see me in your school. You're going to see me in your lunch breaks. A lot of that contracted service, unfortunately, is emergency style. So yeah, Kim, I'll send you a invite.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Anything else on the report before we move on? I'm not seeing anything. So we are on to bond business. There are 2 agenda items. The first is the project management fee amendment. And this is Director Allen, I believe. Will I pull this up here?
Sure.
There we go.
So, Madam Chair, members of the board, you have in your packet a project management fee amendment. We're bringing this before you this evening as new business. One thing I wanted to point out is that the document in your packet is the most recent version. It has the dollar amount of $398,000. In the write-up, the summary in your packet, it has a slightly higher number that was from a previous iteration and didn't get updated when the memo got updated. So just so if you're curious as to which number is accurate, it's the one in the memo. You have the information from David McKay in your packet, the memo that was written by him, making the request. One thing I wanted to add to that request is he talks about the memo speaks to the dollar amount increase. What it doesn't speak to is the square footage increase. So went back and looked a little bit at the amount of square footage that was added to the overall projects from the original plan, the plan at which HMK made their proposal, and what ultimately got constructed. And there was over 80,000 square feet that was added to the original scope. That's 80,000 square feet is an amount greater than Oak Grove Elementary. So there was, I say that merely to indicate that there was a significant amount of scope that was increased with regards to the overall projects. And for that reason, the project fee amendment seems prudent. I have had some conversation with David that I believe the FF&E number might be might be more than what is needed. However, that is a not to exceed amount. It's billed on an hourly rate, so we'll only pay for what we use. David McKay is on the call, and so on the Zoom. So if there are any questions, he can certainly answer them.
I do see a question or comment from Director Eastman first.
Yeah, I have several questions, so bear with me if you would please. What was the original contract date? What's the date on the original contract?
I believe it's June 10th or June 10th of 2017.
Okay. So when did we recognize the fact that the scope had increased in comparison, and also there's some additional funds beyond the original bond premium funds. So when did we recognize the fact that the scope had increased and made it look to someone that we were headed in the direction of this memo?
Well, I mean, the scope increased, through the fall of 2017, spring of 2018. One of the things that I did throughout the program was, instead of doing a adjustment on a semi-annual basis of the fixed fee contract, I did it on a monthly basis, and I tried to actualize to the time spent to the benefit of the district. So my goal throughout this entire program was to not have to come with a fee amendment, to be able to do the work without a fee amendment. The delays at Oak Grove, at Meadow Ridge, at South, and at West have forced me now to, even with what I was able to do to basically under invoice based upon the fixed fee schedule, it has brought me to the point where I need to request additional fees to be able to finish the project.
So was the original fee in the original contract, was that based on the dollar amount of the bond and the accrued bond premium? I mean, is that how that contractual arrangement was arrived at?
It was based upon the program as we knew it. You see at time, there were two, the first two sheets following the memo are the time allocation worksheets that we use to figure that fee. And that's what the fee was based upon, the allocation of manpower to those various projects. There's a contrasting based upon what the actual is. For instance, when you drop down to the document that's dated September 7th, 2020, you see a light green showing the extension of time due to the project's not completing on time. And that's, I mean, that is the majority of the additional time that's needed in this requested compensation. Did I answer your question?
For the most part, but I have another.
Okay, good.
So will any of this fee or additional cost, will any of this additional cost be absorbed in contingency from any of the projects?
No, it's when we built the budgets based on a percentage, the fee percentage of the original contract value. I think it was like 3.05%. So those budgets are built on that. With the bond premium and with this add, it drops the fee down to about 2.68%. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is that we have 3.05% set aside in the budgets for project management. And this is actually decreases it, which helps the projects out.
Okay.
So no additional money is going to be needed from any of the money that has not been allocated to projects. It's already, there is money in the current project budgets to cover this additional fee.
Okay. So then can I assume then that these increases were identified much earlier than this document dated September 8th?
I wouldn't say that they were identified. I wouldn't categorize it as identified, Pat. What I would say is that, again, when we say, let's just take Meadow Ridge. When we built that budget, we allocated 3.05% to project management of the total project cost. And that's what that budget was built upon. Okay. And so what we tried to do was we tried to complete all of the projects within the original fee. And probably one of the largest contributing factors to our inability to be able to do that has been the time it's taken to close the projects out. You know, if you look at Oak Grove, we had forecasted we would have originally been done by October 1st of 2019. Now we're forecasting we'll be done by September. So the closeout has almost taken a year longer, just in time, in working with the contractors. Now, it wasn't the same amount of time that we had when we were building the projects, but there was it still equates to time.
Okay. All right. Well, it just and I know nobody's trying to pull anything over on anybody. It just seems curious to me that we're this far down the line and not out of line, let me assure you, in asking for this compensation. It just seems a little late. Maybe I'm being too Pollyanna-ish about that you would be able to have projected this early on and would have been maybe more in deep conversation with Mr. Allen in regard to this rather than waiting until 6 months are left on West and Meadow Ridge is, all intent and purposes, is done. So it just seems curious, and
Yes, sure.
Saying there's anything dishonest, it's just odd to me.
I understand. My goal is always to try to do more with less. It always has been. And if I have one fault, it's that I could wait. I probably wait too long, and I'm probably overly optimistic that I'm going to be able to achieve the goal that we originally set. Then there comes a point where I recognize that I'm not going to be able to. And with that, I probably, if I would have come to you a year ago, I probably would have forecast a larger number. Now I know where I'm going to be based upon time. And I think it's probably a fair number to the overall program from my perspective, more realistic. And I don't have to have some buffer or contingency in there because of what I don't know. I hope that makes sense.
I would suggest that a conversation started a year ago at this level would make this conversation a little more manageable, at least for me anyway. And
okay.
Again, I don't disagree with any of your numbers. I would just also hope that not having this discussion earlier would have any influence on the West Albany extra money that we had to pay out for the awning, that possibly there might have been contingency in there we didn't realize until this document in regard to the inability for the budget to cover that awning that we had to pay extra for. But I don't believe that that would be the case, but it certainly might be something that somebody could argue. So,
okay.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And David, this is Kim. I just wanted to clarify that I heard you correctly in that the funds to cover this are in the projects themselves without having to dip into the contingency amount for each of those projects. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'm assuming it would have been a situation where we potentially would have seen a savings. Otherwise, my only concern, and the reason I was asking that was, does that mean that going forward and approving additional things from this point to the end of some of those projects means there's less funds available for anything that might come up going forward outside of the contingency? So what I'm getting at is, are we looking at a possibility of having overages or things we need to cover elsewhere by utilizing these funds now for this piece?
I do not foresee that. I mean, South is the only one that we've reported that we've had some overages, but Oak Grove and Meadow Ridge, we don't see that. And West is still underway, and currently we're not forecasting that.
Okay. Okay. Any other board members with any questions or comments? I do not see any. I was going to go back to this item and see, was there a motion needed for this or anything at this point?
We were bringing it forward as new business this evening, and so we can bring it back as old business at the next meeting. Gives the board an opportunity to ask additional questions if they have any.
Perfect. Thank you. Director Eastman, yes.
If this fits into the contingency, then there wouldn't be any necessary action on our part, would there?
You are modifying the contract the district has with HMK. So we don't have the authority to pay HMK the higher amount. They have a not to exceed contract currently with the district.
Okay, so then you're in the process of negotiating that new contract with HMK, or is this, if we're asked to, this amount of money is just going to automatically make that happen, or how does that work?
We'll bring a copy of the original contract with us when we come for old business, and you'll be able to see the old contract with the amendment page.
And Director Eastman, I think it says on the screen now, it says what they're requesting is a fee amendment to be attached to that original contract. So it's not an actual change to the contract, but it would be an amendment to it.
Right, I just wanted to hear it out loud.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, any other questions on this one? Nope. All right, so we are on to the West Albany High School construction update.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. In speaking with Mr. McKay last week, there was some additional information regarding the West Albany High School timeline, as well as potential change orders. And so I wanted to give Mr. McKay an opportunity to bring the board up to speed at this time. So David, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. You have a time extension memo that we've assembled for you. We have been working diligently to evaluate the change order request that Girding has brought forward for an additional 67 days. It's a very complex review. It's not simple. There's a number of various items that are involved in it. We have come to a place in our discussions with Girding, recognizing that one of the things that would help them and help the school is to develop what we're calling a phased completion. The first phase is to turn over areas A, C, and D. Right now, Girding is saying February 15th. We've gone back to them based upon input from Susie. And she's requesting February 1st because that's the first day of the new semester. And so Girding is working on reviewing that, and they're supposed to get back to us this week for that. A, C, and D is the main entrance, the office, the art rooms, the cafeteria commons, the auxiliary gym, the health occupation classrooms. Basically, it's everything but the areas around the auditorium. The auditorium, because it's more complex, the systems needs additional time. The additional time for area B is October 29th, and that's the first day after the return of spring break. Susie,
March 29th.
What did I say?
I think you said October.
October. Okay.
That would be really nice, but I don't think that's what you're saying.
Yeah, no, it's not what I'm saying. Thank you. March 29th. What that does too is it allows the school to be able to put on, I believe it's their spring event. That's one of the things that we've been trying to work with Susie on. What is that called, Russ? The spring?
The Principal Orsborn has hopes of having their spring musical. Obviously, there's a lot of COVID-related issues with that, but that is still her hopes.
Right, spring musical. And then the final completion would be May 15th. One of the reasons why you're not seeing cost or compensation on this request right now is because this is so complex. We felt that if we could give them time and they could be able to receive this time in a change order without cost, what it would do is it would remove much of the pressure off of them and the fear of liquidated damages. And it would remove the fear of liquidated damages against the subcontractors, which would then benefit us, hopefully, in the negotiations of what we would call compensable time. So of that 67 days, there's somewhere between 30 and 40 days are probably compensable through the analysis. And we're going to begin next week with that discussion on how many of those days are actually compensable. And so again, we are trying to take a very complex matter and try to break it into more simple aspects, dealing with the time and then dealing with the money in the next round of discussions with Gertie. I think the memo lays out additional information. I'd like to open it up to questions right now, and in regards to the memo and the time.
I just wanted to clarify real quick, the 67 days. Because it looks to me like it's 5.5 months different. So, I guess I'm confused on the math on 67 days versus, because we're showing a completion date originally of December 6th, now being May 15th for final completion of everything. And even looking at the completion date up above for just the first two, it was almost 5 months for those. So what is the 67 days?
So the 67 days is they're alleging that they have been impacted, delays to shop drawings and submittals and additional work and those types of things. As a point of reference, the November 6th date is the substantial completion date, which would be be the area B, the March 28th, which would be in essence a substantial completion date, or the the February 15th being a substantial completion date. We are giving them additional time, more time than they've requested, to relieve them of pressure in hopes that our negotiations will be more favorable, because they're not going to have to look at trade stacking. They're not going to have to look at excessive overtime, which potentially could drive the cost up even more. And so by allowing them to work straight time, our hopes is that our negotiations on whatever we agree is compensable would be more favorable.
So we're not only looking at the increase in the amount of time, but we're looking at an increase in cost to us as well for that time, is what I'm hearing.
There is, yes, at the top, we talked about compensable versus excusable time delays. And of the 67 days, our analysis is telling us that somewhere between 30 and 40 of those days are compensable. What that means is that for every day that girding is on the job, there is a cost for superintendents and project managers and trailers and forklifts and those types of things. They're what we call the general condition cost. They're the general operating cost on site for girding to be there. And so the compensable would be whatever days we agree of that 67 days times the dollar amount, which is roughly about $3,000 a day.
And I guess what I'm also just trying to wrap my head around. I mean, 67 days is what we see now with 30 to 35 to 40. But if we're extending it out to a May completion date that's longer than that number of days, are we looking at additional compensation then for all of that additional time?
No. At this point, we're not. The only request that the formal request they've made is for the 67 days.
For the time. not
Yes.
for compensation to extend that time.
Well,
So-
they've asked for compensation, and we've told them that we have real issues with a number of the requests in the 67 days that we believe are not compensable. So for instance, COVID, we believe that COVID is not compensable. It's called force majeure or major force. Neither the Albany School District or Girding had any control of that. It's a major force that happened on the project, and no one is really at fault. So, and so therefore, we're saying that it's excusable, but it's not compensable. Another one is the fires. They had to pull off the job for 2 weeks, so they couldn't work. You know, they could try to make a request for extended general conditions. Again, it is a force majeure, a major force that neither GAPS nor Girding had any control over. So we will give you the time. The time is excusable, but it's not compensable because GAPS is not at fault. Therefore, we don't believe that they should have to pay additional cost for that extended time.
And what were some of the reasons for the 35 to 40 days that are compensable?
When we do a deep analysis, when we have the schedule consultant, the independent schedule consultant that is the district schedule consultant, do a thorough review of the critical path schedule, what and he goes through all of the RFIs that Girding has said has impacted it, the change orders that have impacted it, the submittal review and shop drawing review that have impacted it. He's only seen roughly a 35 to 40 days that the project, which then becomes the responsibility of GAPS, so it is responsible for. And those are in issues in the design documents, whether they're design errors or design omissions or ambiguities that RFIs had to answer, in delayed submittal review or shop drawing review. In other words, the review by the architect and their design consultants took longer than the contract allows for. Contract is very specific. They have 14 days. And so if that extended beyond that review time, then the part of that. So we've done this he's done a very deep analysis, thorough analysis of that. And then with that information is what we'll begin the negotiations with them in regards to an agreeable, what we would recommend to the board as a fair compensation for delay.
Okay, because I'm just looking at 40 days at $3,000 a day is $120,000.
$120,000.
Right.
Right.
And again, were these things that were the districts doing, or was it a situation where, you know, a contractor or someone else caused a delay that shouldn't be something we are responsible for versus,
Yes.
and how that works itself out? I'm assuming from what I'm seeing here, and I know some of the other board members have comments and questions too, that we will be seeing something to approve or not approve dollar-wise at some point, or information to look at a little bit more in depth before anything is decided on.
Correct.
Absolutely. This would clearly be a change order in my, I mean, I think I heard Russ, what we would bring to you.
Say the same thing. It would be there. David is requesting that there be two different change orders. One change order being brought sooner than the other. The first change order would be the change order for the days. And then a second change order would be a change order for the amount of compensation. Now, David, the chair brought up the $120,000 of what the 40 times 3,000 would be. I think the question is, what would that do to the bottom, the $120,000, what would that do to the bottom line of the project as it pertains to the estimate, projection right now that the project will end within the revised budget?
Right now, it is I believe it's within our contingency amounts for the project still. But one of the things that I will have in my report, and I'm hoping that, I believe it's the November 15th board meeting, November 16th board meeting, I'm hoping that we have an update, if not the change order request for compensation by that board meeting for you, or at least be able to have a report to you. Number one, of where we believe that negotiation is going to settle at, and number two, how that price impacts the contingency.
Okay. And I just have a little bit of a hard time with wrapping my head around, and maybe it's just some additional questions that I need to think about, is one, whether or not that 35 to 40 days is really something that should be our cost to have to compensate for. I'd be interested in knowing what exactly occurred that we're responsible for. But in addition to that, I'm having a little bit of a hard time deciding how we would approve the number of days without also knowing the dollar amounts, because I don't want to get stuck in a situation where we say, oh yeah, we're going to go ahead and extend this, and they come back and now it's 300,000 instead of 120, or it's, something else, and we've already agreed to the extension. Now we have to find a way to deal with some of that compensation, unless they really are just not tied together. I know
we could
go ahead.
We could work on language in the change order that basically limits the request for compensation to the current request, and we could bring a draft of that change order for your review at the next board meeting on the 26th.
So like a not to exceed kind of scenario if we approve this.
That the negotiation for days would be not greater than the 67 days in the current request for days.
Okay. I know there's some other questions. So Director Eastman, I think you were up.
Well, I don't believe thank you sufficiently in the last go around, David. But thank you. An honest answer to an honest question is always very much appreciated. Given that, I have a few more, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
And spinning off of some of the questions that Kim answered, maybe a little bit finer point. Taking the bullet points under circumstances that have contributed. The unforeseen, well, yeah, we knew like within 7 days that, oops, there's something wrong with the soil and we have problems there. The design and errors and omissions related to the steel scope of work, I recall that, and I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that Girding was the one that said we can field alter the materials that were sent to us because it took so long to get them, it's going to take that much longer to get them again. And why is that recollection of mine? Is that correct?
It is correct, but that was just for a portion of the steel.
Okay.
A portion.
Right. So, and the steel work, the alteration of that steel work, and or any other issues related to the steel that utilized it on site, why would that have not been a change order many months ago, do you think?
Well, there's a change order for the cost to do the modifications to the steel that didn't have days associated with it. That's been approved and has been processed.
So we did do a change order and paid or compensated Girding for some of the field alterations and the supplied steel that was not proper?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
So this request is
about, can you be a little more specific about this steel scope of work that we haven't heard about until today?
Yes. Well, could you repeat that statement or question at the, because I started to speak before you finished, and so therefore I cut you off. And I want to make sure I'm answering correctly.
Yeah. So I'll just restate the question. There appear then to be two aspects to the steel supplied based on design and or production errors that Girding was either able to field, alter, and or utilize in some other fashion that I believe you just told me that some of those field alterations were already paid in change orders. So can you give me an idea of what some of the other steel work is that they're talking about here? The steel scope of work that's being spoken to?
Yes. So I believe, and I want to just point back to some of the board reports that I've talked about this, is that as the shop drawings were coming in for the structural steel and for the tilt wall panels and steel embeds that they would then weld like catwalks and things like that into it, there was a number of issues. There were issues that there were design omissions or errors, okay, that needed to be corrected through an RFI. There was also the issues with Girding not coordinating their subcontractors and material suppliers so that when they submitted the shop drawings, they were giving DLR a complete package to review. So for instance, not only say, does a catwalk in the auditorium, does that detailing need to occur as it comes up against the tilt wall panel and you see the embed and then it's tied to the repar, okay? But hanging off of that cat bar is a curtain, let's say, a stage curtain. So you have the structural steel fabricator that's doing the catwalk, but then you have the theater contractor that's doing the rigging. And all of those rigging components need to have structural calculations and ties, weld ties, and this just kind of goes on. And there's could be as many as 6 or 7 different subcontractors or material suppliers that all of their structural loads needed to be coordinated on a single shop drawing for the structural to be able to then review and make sure that the size of the embed or the size of the steel structure was, and the welds, the type of welds, the bolting, all of that would hold the weight of that structure. So really a pretty complex scenario. It's not just a single sub, and and so it's part and parceling that out. And so this is what I was trying to describe. Is that we needed to go then through all those RFIs, and we needed to go through the shop drawings, when Girding sent it to us, when the review comments went back to DLR, how long did it take for Girding to then get a response to that? Often that was a very long time. It could be 30 days or so. So that's why it's not clean in regards to how much of this is what I would call district responsibility versus Girding responsibility. Does that help?
Yeah,
answer?
and so that gets back to our discussion a meeting or two ago. When do errors and omissions become the responsibility? Errors and omissions from others become the responsibility of the school district, and we have to depend on your ability to sift and sort through all of those. Right. Who put the nut and bolt here, and who had to put it over there, and who forgot to design it that way. So I've got a lot of other questions, but I'm just going to limit myself to one more. Okay. In the second paragraph, per construction contract, blah 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 blah, down about mid paragraph, other delays attributed to design inaccuracies or added scopes. So those, owner added scopes. Yes. Without going into a lot of detail, might you describe some of the larger owner added scopes that we wouldn't have heard about until right now, hopefully?
Yes, give me a second. I closed that document earlier and I need to reopen it.
I knew that, so I wanted you to have to go back and struggle.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
There's no problem for me.
David, while you're looking for that, any owner added scope would have come before the board in the form of a change order for the actual cost of the added scope. what David is talking about, I believe, and David, correct me, is whether or not that added scope added additional days to complete the project.
Right, and that's my point. I'm trying to figure out if there's owner added scope, would that not come through as a change order? And if so, why not? Why didn't we see a change order?
Well, you absolutely would have seen the change order if we added. It would have been the cost of the additional cost of them to do whatever XYZ was, what the change order was, but they wouldn't have dealt at that time whether or not that added an extra day or two to the overall length of the project, which would be, because all we're talking about here is not the cost of the change order. We're talking about whether or not it added days and therefore they're entitled to additional general conditions.
Well, granted, money is time. So yeah, so that was all I was trying to determine. Why wouldn't that day just be automatically added, since there would be a day in a change order? Why wouldn't it have just been taken care of? Why then do we have to go back and resift and resort something that should have been documented and changed at that time?
Yeah, different question. The question being, when we were dealing with the additional hourly rate for the electrician to do whatever it was the change order was, why was the question of additional time not dealt with in that same change order? Is that
exactly
right? Okay, so David, did you catch that part?
Yes. For the most part, the delays that they're asking for, and I need to open up the PCO to go through the detail, but for the most part, the PCO that they're asking for, the 67 days, are related
stands
to
for potential change order.
Yes, it's too many acronyms and I can't even, it's late. Yes, potential change order, proposed change order request. Proposed change order request.
David, let me just throw this out. I don't want to belabor this anymore tonight because they're unfair. I should have maybe submitted these questions earlier on. You would have been better prepared. I don't want to make it look like I'm intentionally putting you on the spot, because that's not what I'm doing. If when this comes back to us again, if you could break down some of those days in regard to the reality of what took place and why they're compensable, I think that would be time better spent than trying to find it this evening. Thank you.
And that is my plan.
So I think with Director Eastman's questions being done-ish, okay, that we also had Director Ward had a couple of comments or questions, I think.
Thanks. I appreciate it's complex, and I think I appreciate the strategy that you're proposing, although I do feel similarly to Chair Butzner about being uncomfortable agreeing to one without quite knowing what we'll be asked to agree to in the other. So agreeing to a time extension when we're not sure what we're going to be asked to agree to for compensation. You addressed that somewhat. I have to say though, I'm just a little annoyed because they have been behind schedule like for months, before fires, before COVID took place. And I've drawn attention to that in previous board meetings. And they've been working at West Albany High School campus through the spring and into the fall with no students there. What I've been waiting to hear is that they've caught up and that those 54 days that they've been behind for months and months, they're now getting on top of. So I'm just, I feel like they've had more favorable conditions because of the closure of our campus than they might otherwise have had, and that we should be on schedule or even ahead rather than behind.
I wish we were. I agree completely, and I can't justify why they're not. I do know that it is a difficult project. And as we talked about in the memo, the number of RFIs are significant, requests for informations, additional clarification. So there are drawing issues, clarity issues that are exasperating their ability to make up time. It's not the full reason, but it is part of it.
And I think that's, I'll have to say, I agree. I think that's where some of my questions came from in the beginning, where I still question whether or not that there's compensation that we should be responsible for. That's my concern with how everything else has played out. So I really would like to see why and how that is the case, because I kind of agree, based on all the time they've had and what we've been dealing with. It feels like that shouldn't be something that is anything that's been done that we were responsible for as a district. But again, I think, for the sake of not belaboring tonight, some of those questions might still need to just be answered. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't going to be a need for us to do an immediate move on this without having the other, and that we would have some time to maybe ask some of those additional questions and get verification and information before the next board meeting. I think it sounds like we all feel like we need some additional, maybe,
it was only
clarification. Yeah.
If and when we asked for action, it will come with the formal paperwork.
Yeah. And I think for any of us, it would be important that hopefully we get that prior to, so we have ample time to be able to put together some questions and have staff have enough time, or David have enough time to be able to look into the questions that we have prior to just getting it with our board packet, because that's going to probably not be enough time for us to ask the questions, not these kinds of questions, and be able to get answers usually. And Director Eastman, go ahead. I see you had your hand up again too. So,
thank you, David. This was a CMGC project, correct?
Yes.
And wasn't the purpose behind the CMGC angle to try to eliminate some of these kinds of issues? I don't mean specifically, but wasn't the CMGC aspect, or the direction to go, given that it cost the district a little more, was to try to utilize some of the special techniques and abilities that the main contractor had? Am I wrong in thinking that maybe that didn't quite work out the way that we had anticipated or hoped?
Well, I would say this, that the answer to your question is, first is yes. Second, I think that given what Girding has had to work through in regards to the documents, I don't want to completely defend them, but it has been difficult, and I think they honestly could be asking for more days than they are asking for. Again, I'm not trying to excuse, and I'm not trying to support their request, but when currently on this project, we're almost 700 RFIs. So every request for information is a question that is an issue in the documents that needs further clarification. And that number is really, really high. I would hope on a project this size, we'd be under 400. So it's not been as easy of a project for them to build and their subcontractors to build as we would hope.
So are you?
It's a complex project.
Are you suggesting that the RFIs come from a lack of architectural design documentation, or was there scope beyond which anyone was prepared to design the project that created the conversation necessity and asking for information?
No, an RFI is typically, it is work within the scope of documents, and there's, say, I mean, the simple one is there's a conflict between architectural, structural, and mechanical.
Right.
And, you know, architectural shows one thing, structural shows another, mechanical shows another. And the question is how do you want us to get from A to B, you know, with these impacts? And so those types of items are what are being asked for clarification. And that, in my mind, typically, okay, often is an issue with drawings that all of the various subconsultants, so architectural, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, low voltage, theater, food service, structural. I'm not trying to belabor it, but there's probably close to 8 to 10 subconsultants. It's not as coordinated of a set of drawings. So all of those subconsultants' drawings coordinated together so that it removes ambiguities or omissions or conflicts.
Okay, I promise I give up now. Thank you very much.
Okay. So I did not see any additional hands at this point for anything else. So we're going to call it. No one else gets to raise a hand on this topic. It's dead. No, I'm kidding. We will move on from this one, but we still have lots of questions and we'll get some answers and we'll be able to discuss this some more as we move forward. But now we've at least had it placed in front of us so we know what the concerns and constraints are and we can start having those conversations. So board members, if you have specific questions, get those in maybe to Director Allen, it sounds like, and he can
please get them to
get those gathered and see if we can't get some information. So, all right, moving along, we have, where am I at here in our agenda? I've lost my spot. New business. And we had board policies, and this was Director Larry and Assistant Superintendent Harlan. I'm not sure which one of you is taking this one.
Well, I think it's a little bit of both of us. I'll go first. Okay. So in your board packet, you will see new board policy GBN-JBA. The reason it's labeled like that is because this is a new policy that will actually reside in both the personnel and student sides of the policy. So approving one actually approves both. This is a complete rewrite of the policy regarding sexual harassment. And it's a complete rewrite because there were sort of a confluence of two different things. One was significant changes to Oregon state law in the 2019 session. And the other was the rewrite of the new Title IX regulations under the current federal administration. And so the changes were significant enough that OSBA basically has recommended to us that we get rid of our old policy and in place of it adopt this new policy. And so that is the staff recommendation.
Were there questions about this particular policy as you guys went through it? I'm assuming these will come back as old business at our next meeting. So if there are additional questions or concerns, if you guys could get those sent in so that we can make sure we address anything on that.
The only additional comment that I would make is that there is an AR down in the information section that's attached to this as well.
Great. Okay. And was there was a second policy too?
There was.
Yes.
So there is policy JHH. This is coming before you for the first time and is a required policy by OSBA. So it's not replacing one that we currently have, but it's completely new. and it has to do with suicide prevention programs being present in school districts. And that requirement, I am grateful and pleased to say that we have one and have had one, really thanking Jill Baker, who does no longer works for the district, but had, and Joyce Hall, who still does. And we're really key, Anna Harriman, key supporters of Sources of Strength, which is our suicide prevention program that has been supported by the Albany Public Schools Foundation as well. But you will see this come back at our next board meeting. And again, this is a required OSBA policy that requires school districts to have comprehensive suicide prevention programs for students.
So my only question on this one that I had was just, how does this policy align with others? Is it, because I know that it stipulates that we have one, and I know that we've mentioned in here the different things that we have in place that we're utilizing. I'm curious how that kind of measures up with what other districts might be doing, or what other, like, have we worked with other districts to see best practices and kind of what other people are doing? I think this is just such a hot topic that, you know, I know we've had this in place. You know, I wonder how thorough, you know, is it thorough enough? Is it appropriate enough? Are there other things we could glean from other folks? Or if OSBA's had any insight as to what other people are doing at the same time?
Yeah, so suicide prevention has been part of some of the state standards and requirements as they pertain to health education, but this is much more specific. I would also say that Superintendent Goff and other area superintendents actually just got together, I want to say last week, specifically around this topic, to talk about what we can do as a region, because we have seen an increase in our region specifically. Sources of Strength is a research-based program, and it's based on support systems and structures within the school that rely on trusted adults, but also training for students and staff. And this is in addition to the partnership that we have with Lynn County Mental Health around QPR training, that we have counselors and staff. And it's been, I think the training is good for 2 years. And so again, just like a multi-layered approach to have some positive redundancy, but absolutely this has been a topic of planning and conversation actually very recently with leaders because of the concern.
Okay. Do we envision changes to this because of some of those conversations? Like, will we see it morphing even more as we go, do we think?
You know, policy, go ahead.
I would think that we would see changes necessarily to the policy, which is, you know, requires that these things happen. What we should see is changes to practice and just more robust safety nets for students, not only within schools, but I would say within our community. You know, one of the things that we know are schools play a pivotal role, and we also know the community does as well, so that students have all of these factors in place for them, and multiple safety nets. And so not only having this for us as a school district, but honestly partnering with parents, the community, mental health providers, Boys and Girls Club, everywhere where youth are, because we know that those connections to trusted adults are really, really important, and they happen in school and other places. And we know that those protective factors are one of the best ways that we can equip students.
And I would just add that in addition to the things that Lisa listed, many of which were things that we discussed in the regional superintendents group about needing to train more people within our systems. QPR training is one of those pieces. How do we ensure that everybody understands QPR training? And we actually have, I think it's over in Lincoln County, some high schools who are being trained so the students themselves, excuse me, are being trained in QPR, which is an interesting approach that they're studying. In addition to that, an offshoot from that meeting resulted in Linn County Mental Health offering us a couple staff members who are trained in culturally responsive mental health supports for youth. And they have been speaking with Anna Harriman about how they might be able to interface with our kids. In addition, Anna actually teed up an LGBTQ plus limited in-person group that she was just about to get started, but because of where it was being held, it can't begin right now because of the COVID diagnoses that we have. So I would say that we are offering more than we have in the past, and we have better networking across the district superintendents. I think that the people within the systems who do this work have been fairly well connected to each other, but I think that what is different right now is that there is a lot more awareness on the part of the district level leaders who might be able to support the work of those who have already been engaged.
Were there other questions or comments on this policy? Nothing? Okay. So that moves us into the SIA grant agreement.
So Madam Chair, members of the board, this is what you'll see is the grant agreement that was received from the state of Oregon for the district to enter into. The grant represents, so, oh gosh, way back when, after months and months of work and in those good days, this grant was going to represent about $7.6 million. And we brought to you outcomes, strategies, and activities. There was a plan that was due, of course, to the state that outlined those things and represented that budget. So we, what you'll see here is an agreement that's about 31.5% of that original planning. So it's about $2.396 million for this year. And our original SIA plan still stands. We think it's a good plan, and we really would love to be able to implement that full plan. With 31% of the funding, essentially we'll be implementing 31% of the plan. So we don't come back before you with a different plan or an amended plan, but rather just the dollar amount for the grant agreement is amended, and what we'll be able to fund will be different. The requirement on the part of the state is that this grant agreement goes before the board. So it's new business. It will come back next month for old business, and give enough time for folks to review it and for any public comment if there is any. And I think that's, I was trying to look through the original, which I know you have in your past board packets, but the original plan and budgeted items, our outcomes are the same. The strategies that we'll use are the same, but obviously just a much limited version. It was most of the high kind of dollar ticket items that we had in there are the things that you'll see or are the things that we won't be able to fund. So we had items in there around hiring of staff. There were 2 items, one that was 1.3 million, one that was 1.4 million. Those are not things that obviously we'll be able to do with 30% funding. And there were some things that without students being in person didn't make as much sense either. I think the important thing to note too is we just received this agreement, I think last week on maybe Tuesday or Wednesday. So just right in time to squeak it in for this board meeting. So it will come back before you, and I am open for any questions. One of the things that you'll notice,
Lisa, in 2 weeks it will come back, right?
Thank you. Yes. One of the things that you'll notice that I would just kind of want to point out too is it's pretty clear about a few things in terms of these grant funds. One is ensuring that they're used for kind of 2 main purposes. The behavioral, mental, and emotional health and well-being. And the second is to ensure equitable outcomes for students, regardless of identifying factors. And so that's a lens that we used throughout the whole process, throughout our strategic planning. And of course, in the original SIA plan that, again, you have in past board packets, that was a question we had to answer for all of our outcomes and strategies.
All right. Thank you. I know there's a lot of information there and it's different than what we've saw before. So I think part of it is just taking some time to regroup and look over what's there, what's being covered. And remind me again, the bottom line dollar amount for us is looking like what?
2.396 million. Mm-hmm.
396.
And I appreciated in the grant agreement, which I have in the report, just kind of pulled out what the state is really clear about, what they expect to see.
Mm-hmm.
So what we will have to answer to in terms of how these dollars are used, what they would like to see, and then what they would love to see. And so I think that's helpful when you look at what you're planning for, and if you're having to cut 70% of your plan, you know, what that looks like.
And for our directors, that's on pages 19 and 20, it looks like, on that second document, the agreement. So any additional questions, comments? Again, coming back at our next meeting. So if there are questions or things ahead of time, it would be helpful to get those in. I'm assuming to Assistant Superintendent Harlan, we can get those to you for this topic. Okay.
Absolutely. And it might be helpful to refer to past board packets in the plan to be able to lay them kind of side by side.
Yeah. Which is wonderful that we have board book now, because we would be able to find those, but I don't know that they're all in here because I don't think we've gone back to old ones and put them in here. So if you have trouble finding something, I'm sure we can reach out to Chris and she would help find those for us. So no other questions that I'm seeing at this point. We did have the AR under old business. I'm assuming that is the one that was tied to the first sexual harassment. Both of those, it looks like, are correct. And there's nothing needed on those. They're just informational. Yep. Okay. Anything else for the good of the order? Yes, Director Aganaga.
I think we all owe a round of applause to Rena Howard at South Albany High School and the rest of the debate team for moderating the mayoral event the other night. I was really impressed. I watched it twice. They did a great job.
I understand too that the questions, and I only know this because one came from my daughter, which was a little surprising, but they a lot of the questions came from the students, and some of those students are taking their history classes. They're doing American history or modern history, and they're talking a lot about those things right now. So I thought that was nice to see that those questions were being pulled just from the class work that they've been doing. And they got asked if they could, have those utilized. So I thought that was really cool too. So kudos to all the kids out there that ended up participating in those questions that were asked too.
And the counselor interviews are coming up this coming Thursday.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. All right. Let's see, under adjourn, I'm getting this down. We have our dates of interest. So this Friday, myself and Vice Chair Thompson will be doing pre-planning, and then a reminder that we have October 19th, our board retreat, again virtual, but that'll start at 5:30. I'm anticipating, I think 8:30 is what we said for an end time. Does that sound right to everyone? Oh no. We did have some conversations about some of the topics there. We will have Kristen, am I getting her name right? Kristen from OSBA. there to do about an hour-long training and discussion with us, which I think is going to be great. And we'll have that agenda going out soon. And then our regular board meeting on the 26th of October. You'll note that we did have the removal of our fall awards ceremony for students. And so hopefully we'll be able to bring something like that back in the spring. But we'll see how that goes. So those are our topics of our dates of interest coming up.
So I assume that the board retreat is BYO M&Ms.
Unless we can convince Assistant Superintendent Harlan to deliver them
Right.
via Uber Eats or something, I don't know, but yes.
Strategy. So
I mean, we're gonna have to
deliver.
we have to provide our own dinner even. What's that? So yeah.
She's like, that was not in my job description.
Right.
Well,
It is happening before.
Jars that are not full, because on the way over,
Yeah.
sure, there will be a few handfuls here and there.
Yeah. It is Halloween. You could just leave them on the doorstep in the little containers for us, right? All right. So yes, with that, we will adjourn at 10:02. I know, late one. Thanks all.